Merry Christmas, everybody. In today's video, I want to talk about the socialist countries that banned Christmas in the 20th century. And several countries have banned Christmas throughout history all over the world for several different reasons. Sometimes it was Christians banning Christmas because they felt like the holiday had become too secular even, and so they were banning it for puritanical reasons. Sometimes it was banned in order to strengthen the Muslim majority in a country, but the few Christmas bans that I want to talk about today were particularly anti-religion in nature. Now, I'm a Christian who is a socialist, so I have a little bit of a different perspective. But for those that don't know me well, I want to say I want to reclaim the radical core of the Christmas story that reminds us of the revolutionary implications of the Jesus story as an anti-imperialist narrative that came out of this oppressed group under the Roman Empire. So usually when I come across a Marxist atheist or even Marx himself critiquing religion, I usually agree with everything they're railing against, and I rail against it too. But I follow the radical stream within the Christian tradition that has always criticized the way religion is used to oppress people. I have a lot of videos about that, but I just wanted to start out by saying that as we get into this. And the first example I wanted to bring up is one that I find really interesting from this perspective, because in 1967, they were the first country ever to declare itself a constitutionally atheist state. And in that year, over 2,000 churches, mosques, cloisters, and shrines were relinquished to the government, and several of them were converted to secular facilities, and some of them were destroyed. Several clergy were imprisoned and forced to get new careers, and some of them were even executed. The Penal Code of 1977 imposed prison sentences of 3 to 10 years for religious propaganda and the production, distribution, or storage of religious literature. And naturally, all these restrictions on religion included banning Christmas. And it was literally illegal to say Merry Christmas to others. That's why it's so annoying when American conservatives say stuff like, we can't even say Merry Christmas anymore. Like, just because the magic words didn't appear on your Starbucks cup that month. Come on, we're talking about a real war on Christmas and religion. And of course, as you'd expect, the Soviet Union also banned Christmas in a similar way, but they were never constitutionally atheist, and they never made it technically illegal to be religious. In 1928, they banned the celebration of Christmas, which meant no more Christmas trees and lights and decorations and gift giving and all of that, and December 25th was just a normal day to go to work. And before the ban, Christmas looked pretty much how you would imagine a typical Christmas to look like, with all the religion and the Santa Claus folklore, except instead of Santa Claus, they had Ded Moroz, which literally translates to Grandfather Frost. Ded Moroz is similar to Santa Claus in the English Father Christmas, but he has his roots in Slavic pagan mythology as a winter wizard. And instead of reindeer, Ded Moroz had 3 horses that led his sleigh, and instead of coming down the chimney, he would just go through the front door to leave the presents for the children. But when the Soviet Union banned Christmas, they declared poor old Ded Moroz as an ally of the priest and kulak. Christmas and Ded Moroz were seen as too religious and bourgeois. Here's an illustration from a newspaper published in December 1930 saying, "Away with the bourgeois tree." And then in 1935, they decided to take a different approach because people were still secretly celebrating Christmas, and so Stalin decided to let the good little Soviet children have their gifts and lights and decorations and trees back, but not for the holiday of Christmas, but for the celebration of the secular holiday of New Year's. Stalin also gave them back Ded Moroz, except he updated him by replacing his red coat with a blue one, and now he also gave lectures to children on good communist behavior, and would also apparently end his talks by saying, "And to whom do we have all the good things in our socialist society?" To which the children would apparently respond in unison, "Stalin." On December 15th, 1963, the Czechoslovakian president Antonin Zapataki reportedly said, "The story of the birth of the Christ child is only an exploiter myth. Times have changed. The little Jesus has grown up and now is Grandfather Frost. He no longer is in tatters and naked, but well dressed in a fur hat and coat." The Soviet Union also famously produced a lot of anti-religious propaganda through groups like the League of Militant Atheists, and also included a lot of anti-religion in their children's education programs, where they openly mocked and chastised religion and encouraged children to protest against the Christmas tree and to spit on crucifixes. And this all just seems so unnecessary when you understand the depth of religious expression, especially beyond the ways that oppressive powers have co-opted it for their own agendas. Many Marxists have taken Marx's critique of religion and turned them way up beyond Marx's actual perspective on religion. Marx and Engels never advocated for the forced abolition of religion or for state atheism. Actually, in a meeting in the First International, when Bakunin and some other anarchists suggested that they should make declaring yourself as an atheist as a prerequisite for joining the group, Marx apparently mockingly replied, "As if one could, by royal decree, declare the abolition of faith." Marx and Engels saw religious persecution and violence toward religious people as nonsense. Not because they were religious or they had sympathies toward religion or because they thought it would be morally wrong. No, they just thought it would be a waste of time and would needlessly split the workers' movement. Everyone loves quoting Marx saying religion is the opium of the people. But if you actually read that quote in context and read some of the sentences before it, it gives a slightly different message than the message people try to push whenever they quote that quote out of context. He said, religious suffering is at one and the same time the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. By the way, let's be reminded that Marx took opium because of bad physical pains he had throughout his body. And eventually, the opium stopped being able to alleviate the pain, and so he had to stop taking it. But Marx was able to understand that even though religion can be an expression of real suffering, and even a temporary alleviation of real suffering, he also was able to see that it is at one and the same time a protest against real suffering. Throughout history, religion has empowered people to question why their suffering was occurring and empowered them to struggle for freedom from their suffering. And that's the religion I'm actually interested in. In Lenin's essay, Socialism and Religion, Lenin said, "Unity in this really revolutionary struggle of the oppressed class for the creation of a paradise on earth is more important to us than unity of proletarian opinion on paradise and heaven." And I read that and think, yeah, I agree. As a Christian, first and foremost, at the radical core of Christianity is a movement for the transformation of our material reality. And that is the true origin of the story of Christmas as well. Mary finds out she's pregnant in this story and doesn't praise God saying, "Yay, now we're all gonna go to heaven after we die because our souls have been saved." No. She praises God, saying, "He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty." And if the Romans thought Jesus was just about a paradise in heaven, then they wouldn't have killed him on an execution stake on a hill in public in order to deter others from joining this movement that was antithetical to Roman imperialism. And yes, Christianity has also expressed itself through imperialism and has often become the very thing that Jesus was against. But the radical stream that has flowed from Jesus throughout all history that has led up to people like me, we've all been against those perversions of Christianity. Castro in socialist Cuba had also banned Christmas as part of restrictions on religion, but his reason was largely in response to Spanish-born fascist priests that were condemning Castro. And Castro responded to them by saying, "The public know perfectly well how respectful the government has been in matters of religion." And then he said, "There are two types of priests. those who served poverty and those who served great wealth. To serve great wealth is to betray Christ. And there's no doubt that Franco has a sizable group of fascist priests in Cuba. So Castro wasn't ignorant of these two different kinds of religion that we're talking about here. He was fully aware of the type of religion that protested against suffering. But in order to rid the country of the type of Christianity that was causing suffering, he did it the only way that Marxists of the time knew how, by just banning religious rituals and persecuting Christians. However, in the 90s, Castro slowly started to ease off restrictions on religion, and then in 1991, he allowed Catholics to rejoin the Communist Party. And then in 1997, he reinstated Christmas as a national holiday as a gesture of goodwill to Pope John Paul II after he had visited Cuba. Christmas didn't return to Albania until 1990 after the collapse of communism there. And then Christmas was reinstated in Russia in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union with Gorbachev's resignation, which actually happened on December 25th in 1991. And when these countries brought back religion and religious holidays like Christmas, what do you think happened? Do you think everyone had become atheists by then and didn't really care for Christmas return at all? Nope. There were massive resurgences of faith in all these countries. People were stoked to celebrate Christmas again and be public about their faith, because it turns out people were still celebrating Christmas in secret the whole time. No country that put restrictions on religion and the suppression of Christmas and other religious holidays were successful in suppressing it. The Albanian journalist Artan Rama grew up in Albania during this period, and he said, "During Orthodox Easter, my grandmother would boil just one egg, dye it red, and give it to me with no explanation." And I just find it hilarious thinking about that image, but I find it really fascinating how so many people never gave up celebrating these holidays in secret. The 30-year period in Cuba where they couldn't celebrate Christmas is known in Cuba as Las Navidades Silenciadas, the silent Christmas. Cuban history expert Enrique Saciero Gari said, Cuba differs from others in that, in this 30-year period, Christmas was marketed around the world as a business, and the religious aspect of it largely went away. Cuba wasn't a part of that commercialization of the holiday, so to speak. And I find that really fascinating, and it seems like perhaps the spirit of Christmas grew stronger, or at least more sincere, during its ban when it had to be celebrated in secret. Earlier, I was talking about how I follow a radical stream of Christians that have always criticized the way religion has been used to oppress people. One of the people I would say is part of that radical stream is the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, and definitely one of my Christian heroes for sure. He had realized that the establishment of Christendom had perverted and masked the message of Christianity. And he said, "My one thesis is that Christianity no longer exists. My one task is to reintroduce Christianity to Christendom." And I relate with that task so much. And so many atheist critiques of religion are really criticizing Christendom, and I'm totally on the same side of the atheists on that. But thinking about these secret Christmas celebrating Christians and how they were in situations where they really couldn't say Merry Christmas, it makes me think of this other Kierkegaard quote that I really like, where he said, "A Christian in the New Testament sense is literally a stranger and a pilgrim. He feels himself a stranger, and everyone involuntarily feels that this man is a stranger to him." The first Christians felt this way, and Jesus felt this way because their Christianity didn't sit well with those in power and got them killed. So, I'm obviously against state atheism, but I'm also against state Christianity because Christianity was never meant to side with the state. I am for state secularism, though, which allows people to be religious or atheist. But it allows us to even further reclaim the radical core of Christmas if we can decommercialize it and take it out of the hands of corporations and out of the hands of capitalism. Think about it. The commercialization of Christmas was necessary in order to blind us from the radical message of Christmas, which is actually about removing oppressive power structures in the name of something that transcends human power and has always empowered the oppressed to struggle for their freedom. That's what Christmas is really about. And that's what I'm going to be talking about this whole month on this channel, and talking about a radical Christmas. So if you want to hear me talk more about this stuff, make sure you subscribe and check out my other videos and turn on notifications, all that, and follow my Twitch as well, twitch.tv/whoisdamon, to hear me talk about this stuff in a more freeform and interactive way. And of course, I would love it if you can support me on my Patreon, patreon.com/Damon Garcia. And this month I'm dropping a whole bunch of exclusive videos just on Radical Christmas on there, because I've got a lot to say on this subject. So shout out my patrons: Keith Wetzel, Blake the Bold, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, James Finlay, New Transcendentalist, Kristen Mouse, Mike Togman, Peter John Blake, Mimi McGann, Callie, Onion, Keegan James, and Tammy D. Appreciate every single one of you. And Merry Christmas. See you later.